Welcome back to Digital Wandering. And today, on this very snowy day where I'm located, hopefully where you are, it is nice, sunny, and comfortable at the very least. But today, despite the conditions, I wanted to do a review, a retro review of the device I have in front of me right now. And this is the second Nokia device I've shown on the channel. Previous one was the Nokia Lumia 635. This is a phone that came out earlier from Nokia before they made the full transfer over to Windows Phone. This is a Nokia N9. And you see it has a time on the display, so it has an always on display, which I'm loving. This is the first device that I've had that has an always on display. Some phone manufacturers have it as a common feature. I think Samsung phones, at least the flagships, and the Pixel phones, I think also uses the Google Pixel phones have always on display. And there's also apps that will allow you to add this feature to your phone. So this is the first device that I've used that has an always on display. Now this is a 2011 device, and I've only been using this for about a little longer than a week. So I was not an early adopter. The device has a cult following. So if you go online, you will see people who are long-term supporters of this device. It's very unique in that it doesn't run Android, doesn't run iOS, it doesn't even run Windows Phone. It runs an operating system called MeeGo, which is unique, especially at the time. It was very unique because it didn't use any type of on-screen or physical buttons. Everything was by swipes, which is starting to become part of even Android and iOS. They're starting to use a lot of swipes to do certain functions. But this was back in 2011. And there's also another smartphone operating system called Selfish OS, which I think is kind of the successor to this MeeGo. I have never used Selfish, but I may actually try to use it sometime in the future. It just depends on how things go. So this is really, you don't really get a lot of opportunities to use a lot of alternate operating systems. So this was a great experience. And I've only recently really learned about this phone. I think I have a vague recollection of when it came out in 2011, and it wasn't what I was looking for at the time. So I didn't really look into it that much. But recently I came across some discussions online, and I became intrigued enough that I went out and found one in great condition. This is a refurbished model from China, and that's going to be the case for a lot of these devices that you get, that they're going to be from China. So let's look at it a little further. First, we can just look at the case itself, which is, I think, is a very beautiful design. It is kind of boxy, I guess. Actually, let's just turn that off again. We'll talk about certain other things about the software a little bit, but I just want to look at the case right now. See the Nokia branding on the around the camera, and it does have a flash. Only has these buttons. These are the only buttons on the physical case. You have the volume here, up and down, and then the power button. Down firing speakers, which I like. Speakers, when it comes to speakers, there's two types of speakers that are good: front facing and down firing. Front facing is the best, but down firing is also pretty good. A lot of smartphones will have speakers on the back, which, although they work pretty good, it can muffle the speaker when you have the device on its back. So having down firing speakers is pretty good. And let's just look at the ports, it really only has one port that's not covered, and that's the headphone jack. The other ports here on the top, let's just see, hopefully you can see that really good. If it focuses, let's see if I can get that focus a little bit better. You have, I think this is for the SIM card right here. I don't have a SIM card in here, so I never actually opened that up. But let's just look at the charging port, because this is a charging port right there, but it has a flap on top of it. So you have to, that little dimple there, you have to press in. And there you go. Often it takes me a few tries. And that, how you access the charging port. Now I have to tell you, this flap feels very flimsy. Now it's possible it's stronger than I think, but it feels like I could just pull and yank this off or break it in some way. So that's the one thing, it seems like this would be a major point of failure, this charging flap. So I'm just going to be very careful with this when I have to charge the device. Now, we can wake this. You can either press the power button, or it does also have double tap to wake, which sometimes I have to try a couple times to see if that works. See, it didn't wake right there. Let's see if I can do it a little bit more. There we go. So this is the lock, like the lock screen, and it will time out fairly soon. There you go. See if we can wake it up with the tap. There you go. Got to do it just right. And now this has the wallpaper, and right now I'm rocking one of the included wallpapers. You only see the wallpaper on the lock screen. So when you get on the interior of this device, there's no wallpaper. So let's just get in there. And you see that, we'll talk about this a little later. If you can, let's see if we can get that on camera here. Device update. And we'll talk about that. But okay, let's just get inside this bad boy. You have to get to the lock screen in order to get in. And this is one of the screens on the interior. And this shows the apps. And it actually doesn't have a traditional home screen. So it has 3 different screens that you can access different functions on the phone. And these are the apps here. And I made some alterations with this, very few alterations. Again, I told you this is the Chinese model. So when I first turned on the phone, everything was in Chinese. So I had to change the language setting. And so right now it's set to US English. And the apps that I have on that are on display outside the folders are the apps that I feel are the most functional here. Because this MeeGo operating system, the strange thing when Nokia released this, from what I'm reading, is that this is right before they made the transfer over to Windows Phone. And they announced that this is going to be the last MeeGo phone that they released, they were going to release. So when they released this, they basically told consumers that this is going to be the last of its line. So it's a really strange thing to release a phone and basically tell the consumer that just to basically imply that, hey, this is the end of the line for this. So, I mean, you have to question what the support will be like for a phone that will not have any type of successor. But that's what happened. If you look at the Windows phones that Nokia released right after this, they actually have pretty much the same design language, look almost identical. Like if you look at the Nokia Lumia 800 or the 900, look very similar to this. This is the notification page. Let's go back to the apps. It looks very similar to this, but they had Windows Phone as opposed to MeeGo. So let's look at some of the apps here, and I feel like these are the apps of the 16 that are out of the folder. About 15 of them are the most useful that you could still use today in a pretty strong way and still get a lot of use out of them. So you have contacts. You can definitely put your contacts on here and still use it. You have a search function, and this searches essentially the entire device. So if I put in a search term, it will search all the apps and all the documents, all the videos, all the photos. So it's a pretty strong search. So that's still fairly useful. You have the web. That's not as useful, but we'll get into that. Of the 16 that we have here outside of the folder, I would say the web is the least useful, or it has the most challenges. It's still useful, but has the most challenges. You have calendar. Calendar is still something that you could definitely use. Clock is, a clock, so tell time or set alarms. The camera. Let's just open that up real quick. So this is the camera, and it's still a pretty decent camera for what it is. Comparing this to a flagship phone from 2021, or even a mid-range phone from this year, or fairly recent years, there's really no comparison between the two. This would take very weak pictures in comparison. Even when I compare this phone to my 2011 iPhone 4S, which I've shown a lot of times on this channel, I think the iPhone 4S is censored. It pulls in a lot more light than this. So in artificial light situations, this camera really struggles. But if you check online, if you find galleries from the Nokia N9, you'll see that it can take fairly decent photos in really good lighting situations, especially like in natural light, like sunlight. You can take decent photos with this, and video, 720p video. But it has to be really good lighting conditions. In natural light or indoors, it can really struggle. It does have a flash though, so but even with the flash, it can struggle. So you just have to really know how to utilize light. And like I say, with all the old cameras from devices many years ago, which aren't as good as the modern or more recent update releases, you can still, if you're a skilled photographer, you can still take decent photos with them. One thing that's kind of interesting about the camera, and we've already shown the cameras on the back here, the rear camera. Where's the front-facing camera? Does it have a front-facing camera? Yes, it does. Down here. This is the front-facing camera, but it's not accessible from the camera controls here. Apparently, this is used for or was intended to be used for video conferencing. I think I've read that there were apps that you could download when this phone was still. It wasn't really under active development for that long, since it was the last of its line. But there were some apps that were made for this device, and I think there were some apps that you could make use of this camera. I think I'm not 100% sure about that, but through the natural controls here, there is no ability for me to access this. So I could only take pictures using the camera app with the rear camera. So that's kind of interesting. All right, let's just go out of this here. And you have a gallery where you can show your photos. Let's see if we can just look at that real quick. So it definitely is a decent gallery. Now I added photos to this in folders. So I was able to use on my Mac on Big Sur, I have the Android file transfer app. I was able to use the Android file transfer app to access the innards of this phone and transfer files. So I was able to put music on here. I was able to put my photos and also video. I was able to add that on here too. But I added those through folders, and that folder organization wasn't maintained within the gallery app. So you basically get all the photos that you added dumped into one main gallery. But other than that, it's actually pretty good. I think it's a nice gallery. Also supports slideshows. So yeah, it's perfectly fine. You have the music. I was able to add music from my MacBook to this. And the cool thing is that, although I won't be playing into the music, I think just about all the album art, actually let me go back here, was maintained. Only a few songs did not, the album art didn't transfer, only for about 3 out of 60 songs here. Which is a pretty good ratio, because I often have trouble when I transfer music which just already has album art to like an Android phone or to a Windows phone, often it doesn't transfer the album art. So I was very happy to see that the vast majority of the album art transferred over. Let's see here, and you have video, and it played videos fairly decently. One thing is that it struggles with video over 480p. So most videos, if of higher resolution than that, if you put it on the device, it won't play. But if you're able to reduce the resolution to 480p or lower, it normally is able to handle that. You have settings, calculators, the calculator, documents. It actually does pretty good with the documents I've added. I put PDFs on here, and it's able to. It was able to read the PDFs, but one thing I noticed is that I guess maybe it's a memory issue. If you open a PDF, it takes a long time for it to launch, and as you move between pages, it takes a long time for the page to display. And then if you go back a page, if you're going forward and back, it has to refresh the page that you just left. So although it's able to read PDFs, it doesn't read them or maintain them in memory for very long. So it could be a little frustrating if you were trying to read like a multiple page PDF document. Single pages would be more to the capabilities of this device, or something with few pages. Like if you're reading a whole book that's in PDF format, it could be probably a little frustrating on this device. Notes are fine. Notes are notes. One thing they have on here that I really like is this user guide. The user guide, let's open that up. And I wish every phone or every device, every electronic device has something like this. So you can see it's a very full-featured user guide that explains that obviously, since this device doesn't have a huge family of devices, and this was something that was basically at the end of the line for this operating system, people are going to be using this without having any prior experience. So it's good to have a very detailed user guide like this. A lot of things right now is just you have to go on the internet, but to have it on an actual device, offline, and they actually even have, so they have this whole guide here, but they even have a tutorial here. We go out the quick guide. I don't really want to click on it right now, but this actually goes through a hands-on tutorial where you actually learn the swiping gestures and everything else. So that's pretty cool too. That's just really cool thing. Now, one thing I haven't really had to spend a lot of time on the gestures. It feels very natural moving from this. So I kind of just move my fingers. I don't really think about what gestures I'm supposed to do. I just kind of just know it. It's almost, instinctually? Am I saying that right? It's like almost instinct. I'm just using that as to move through the device. It just seems, so, I don't really think about it. I just move my finger and I get to where I need to go. If I explain that correctly. So, if I swipe through the screens, I just do it without actually really thinking about it, and I get to where I need to go. So it feels fairly natural. That's what I'm trying to convey here. The swipe gestures to move through to the different pages here. And they have a few games that were pre-installed. All these are pre-installed. Most of these are the natural devices that come with the natural apps that come with the operating system. The games seem like they were optional, but they did come pre-installed with this device. But like I mentioned, this was the Chinese version, so it came with those games. It also came with a lot of other Chinese apps like these here, which I'm not able to delete these. So I just move them all into their own folder so they can be out of the way. Also, let's go back to the web here, the website. Now, this is the web browser that they have on the device. And the web browser is kind of interesting here. One thing, these are like top sites links. It doesn't have any type of bookmarks that you can actually access. So it's very strange that it doesn't have a bookmark feature where they have a listing of top sites which are pre-installed. And since it's the Chinese version, there's a lot of sites in Chinese. And apparently, you're not able to change this. Um, so it's really weird. You would think you'll be able to edit these top sites, but you can't really. It's kind of like the top sites are kind of pre-installed. So it's a very weird decision for a web browser. Um, and I have a lot of problems with using this on the internet. One issue is that uh, the Wi-Fi drops within minutes after I am able to connect. Um, it drops continuously, so it makes it really hard to use this on the internet. And if you go into settings, there is something in the settings where you can check a box or something like that, and it says it will allow this to connect automatically to your preferred Wi-Fi. Um, but it doesn't work. Every time I check that box, it will just disconnect again in minutes. So it's really frustrating using this on the internet. That's why I would say that the web um, is the internet web browser here is the one of the least useful. I was able to get it to access the internet, but it will drop fairly quickly after accessing it. But while I was accessed, I did create some links on the app page here for some web pages that can still work. Another thing about that web browser is it's very degraded right now. Um, it has a lot of trouble on the modern webs. It doesn't have the security settings in order to connect to like modern websites. So there's only a few websites that I can connect to. Roughly, this is just an estimate on my part. I would say this browser can connect to maybe 1 or 2% of the web. So it's very similar to Internet Exploring if you're on like Mac OS 9 using Cosilla or using Safari on Mac OS Tiger. And I've shown that on previous videos on this channel. It's really hard to connect to the internet. So you're going to be really restricted on what you connect to, and that causes some problems in order to try to maintain this device in 2021, 10 years after it was released. I also have some Nokia apps here that come pre-installed that I don't really have that much of a use for, so I moved it to its own folder so it wouldn't be clogging the apps that I will actually use. So I don't have a SIM card in here, as I mentioned, so I don't really use this for phone or messaging. Haven't added any email, so I'm not really sure if the email will work. I think it would, but so I haven't used the email app. Since this phone is old and had only somewhat support from Nokia, I think a lot of all the Nokia servers that supported this the apps on this phone are shut off. So Maps, Drive, Nokia Music, the store, none of those are able to function now. So I just moved them to the folder so I can't delete them. So I just moved them to the folder so they'll be out of the way. You can also add accounts if you wanted to. There's an RSS reader here, the feeds app. I couldn't imagine that would work right now because of how degraded the internet experience is on here. And there's a Wi-Fi hotspot that I also don't use. So 15 out of 16 of the apps are extremely useful, with the browser being somewhat useful. And I think that's still a compelling use case to use this. I mean, I think this works really good as like a PDA, personal digital assistant, or as a media player. The music works really good. Video gallery is definitely workable. There's some limitations to the documents, but it still works. You have a few games here that you can play. So I think if you really like the form factor and styling of this device, um, using it as a media player is definitely an excellent use case scenario, and it has a headphone jack right there. So that's a definite use case scenario for this. And this refurbished model has pretty decent battery life, so I do like that. Okay, let's look at some of the other screens here. This is a notification screen, and as you see here, it has a device update notification. Since I haven't really set up anything else here, this is the only notification that really it shows, and I have no way to get around this here. Look, and that also is what was showing on the lock screen. But if I look at that update here, there's a real problem with that update, and that the servers are not active anymore. So if I attempted to try to download this update, first it's going to tell me that the Wi-Fi or the internet is off, so I have to turn that on. But even then, with the connection to the internet, these servers in which to download this update do not exist anymore. So there's no way for me to no way for me in this system to get rid of this update message. It's just there forever, apparently. The only way I can do that is to process the update, but I cannot process the update. The update essentially does not exist. The Nokia services that support this update are no more. So that is a problem unless I do some additional things, which I don't know if I'm going to do. Let me see. Let me just show you also here. This is kind of like the multitasking app switcher here. So you have the apps that we opened up so far. You can just switch between them. Let's see, like we can go back. Let's see if we can go back there. So it takes you back to the app that you just were located at. I think this works really well. It takes you right back to the state that you were left at when you last were into that particular app. That works really well. And I talked about some memory issues with reading PDFs, but this app switcher is excellent. It holds everything in the exact same state that you were last. And okay, I just press something well, let's close them all out. Okay, so nothing's open right now. And it's that easy to access the different apps that you had open previously. But yeah, it's a pretty decent device. Using this in 2021 as your main phone, I think the best case scenario is, as I mentioned, as a PDA or a media player, something you can jot down notes, something you can put things on the calendar, contacts. You can use this the same way you would use like a notebook or an address book. And then you have all those media capabilities as well. Using it as a phone, it is 3G. It's not 4G. So that's going to be an issue for certain people because of 3G coverage maybe being eliminated in your area. I still have 3G coverage in my area, so I could, if I wanted to, use this. I keep touching the editors here. But there's a definite time limit on how long that's going to be useful, even if you do have 3G coverage in your area. So I don't know but there are a lot of people, since it's like I mentioned previously, that this device has a cult following. There's a lot of people who still, this is their preferred smartphone of choice. And there are resources online. There is a website. There's web forums of people who are fans of this device, and you can learn a lot from that in order to get this as functional as possible. Like you have that update that I've shown. Although those Nokia servers do not exist anymore, there are places online in which you could flash that update to your phone. I don't know if I'm going to ever do that. I attempted to do it, and the download process was a lot slower than I would have expected. In order to download the update. It was over 1 gigabyte file size, and it was a very slow download. It may just have something to do with the servers I was downloading from at that time. Maybe they were having some issues. I don't know. But what I could do is I could flash the European version of this device. That would get rid of these Chinese apps, and it will also, I'm assuming, get rid of that update message, which is really annoying to me. The fact that it's not only in the notifications but also on my lock screen whenever I open this device. But as I mentioned in previous videos, I don't really like doing a lot of these hacks and things in order to get things to work. I like things I'm more of a user than a tinkerer when it comes to my devices. I do tinker, but not that much. And I do have some questions about certain things about flashing that updated device. I have this as a collectible, and I'm kind of comfortable in its current state. I would like to add additional functionality to it. I would like to get rid of that update message, but I don't want to also in some way damage the device, and I'm not really someone that feels really comfortable flashing a lot of things to my devices, especially since it's not a device I'm using for mainstream use. I'm just using it for as a third or fourth device, as a collectible, as something that I just wanted to have this phone in my collection. So I don't know if I'm going to actually do that. Because there are also the apps, as I mentioned, the Nokia store is not connected. It's disconnected at this point, but there are apps that are available online. You can download a whole app store that has the old Nokia apps on here on that app store, so you can make use of some of those old apps. There are mirrored sites where they are hosting those apps now that Nokia is not doing it any longer. So the support is great for this. If you are someone that is really interested in this device, there are a lot of different things that you can do in order to gain functionality. Now that Nokia doesn't support it anymore, there's a whole community out there that has maintained that support, but it requires a lot of tinkering. And so you got to be someone that really likes to do that. And there's a lot of people, I would say a large percentage of the people that use retro phones will do that tinkering so they can get the most out of their device if they want to actually really use it, not just have it as a collection piece. But yeah, this is a great device. I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I just really love this always on display. I just love that. I just love this, and the base on this is wide enough that it will be able to stand up like that. So I just love that always on display. So just that alone, I need to have this on my other devices. So any new device I get, I'm going to want to have always on display. I just enjoy it so much. And this one just shows the time, but the other ones that you have on other devices, they'll give you weather, how many notifications that you have. I don't really have much in the way of notifications, so I think that would actually show up here too if that ever changed in the future. But this is the Nokia N9, a great device. If you can try to find one, a lot of times it will be from China, but it's worth it if you do make the effort to go out and get one. This is Digital Wandering signing off.